Good evening. The lady who conducted this meditation is Mrs. Agnes Anderson of Calgary, Alberta, Canada, who is here with several of her students and talking about grace. By the grace of God, we New Yorkers have been able to give her and her students typical Calgary weather. Now, we haven't had weather like this since 1888, so you know that it's strictly in her honor. And since I can't manufacture weather, it must be by grace. And it isn't strange that our lesson starts out this evening with a couple of notes on that very subject of grace. Live through the Spirit now. Turn to the Spirit for everything. React only to the Spirit. Let the Spirit be your law, life, activity, and being. You see, the Spirit is invisible. The Spirit is intangible to sense. And it isn't too difficult to live by bread. It isn't too difficult to live by effects. But the minute we turn to this work, we are left in the position, well, as Scripture reads, He hangeth the earth on nothing. And we come to a place where we live through that which is invisible, that which cannot be seen, heard, tasted, touched, or smelled. So that when there is a question of material law or legal law or the law of time, it becomes necessary that we consciously turn to the realization of an invisible something, more truthfully, an invisible nothing, which is to appear externally as the harmonies of our existence. It becomes necessary to make a conscious transition from dependence on that which is visible to a radical, to a complete reliance on that which is invisible and almost, you may say, unknown. It doesn't take very long, if the practice is continuous, until that unknown and invisible becomes tangible, becomes evident as a feeling, as an awareness, as a presence, not one that can be described, but one which can be known. From then on, it isn't difficult. Now, this was shown to me in a vision. Fear grips the world. All of the diplomacy from 1937 to 1956 has been based on fear. Everything that has been done in the world of diplomacy Every move that has been made has been based purely on fear. There isn't an act that you can think of that has been based on love, on understanding, on trust, or on faith. Everything from that minute to this has been done because of a fear that if it wasn't done, something worse would happen. Fear. Fear has gripped the diplomatic world all over the world. You know more about that when you travel the world and see why these fears exist and see why the human mind has no answer to them, not even up to the present moment. The same thing is true with capital and labor relations, except in very minor cases like small firms and small unions. All of the capital and labor relations, all the way back to 1932, have been based on fear. One fear or another. It isn't necessary at this moment to go into all of the fears that were involved, but go back into all of these relationships, go back into all of these experiences, and see the fears that were behind these relationships, and how even the settlements were based on fear, not on justice, not on equity. In every major case, they were based on fear. The health of the world is resting today on a basis of fear. The entire world is inflamed with a fear of cancer, and a fear of heart disease, and a fear of infection, and a fear of contagion. When you travel abroad, you have a hard time getting by a border without having 4, 5, and 6, and 7 inoculations and certificates to prove that you had them and that you had them very recently. Health all over this world is based not on an understanding of God, not on an understanding of a medical science, but on the basis of fear. We are told to fear the heart and have it examined regularly, and fear the lungs and have them examined regularly, and fear cancer and have tests regularly, and fear this and fear that and have tests and have tests, until it seems that we don't live in health, we just live in periods between ill health and more fears. You can travel this country or the foreign countries, and you'll find that society is living in fear. Capital society is living in fear of communistic society, and communistic society is living in fear of capitalistic society. The Roman Catholic world isn't certain today that it can hold its sway where it is. It has already lost some of its territory. The Protestant world certainly is in fear that the Catholic world will take over. The Democrats and Republicans have always feared each other, or that the other would get into power. On what are we basing our hopes of safety and security today? Fear, bombs, the ability to make other nations fear us, the fear that we have of other nations. We are only spending 60-odd billions a year because of the fear of one other country. They are only placing their reliance in bombs because of fear of this country, and all of Europe is in fear of being overrun, and Asia, India. You read in the headlines that the danger spot of the world is the Near East, and the question of which way India will go in the crucial moment. Fear, fear, fear. From one end of the world to the other, it's fear, and the only remedy is something that will make the other fellow fear more than he is fearing, or our fearing what the other fellow will do to us. Yes, it is. It's a world of fear. Is material power the solution to these fears? Does the solution lie in creating bigger and more bombs? The answer is no. And yet, whenever the diplomats meet at any of the conferences that have been held in the last 20 years, have they ever met in confidence or hope? I mean real confidence or real hope that they have a solution for the world's problems, or isn't it again presenting more fears at the conference table? No one has gone to the conference table with any plan that had a real hope of settling the world's affairs without fear. Fear has been the basis of the whole thing. Weapons, more fears. Now, the remedy, you know, and they know too by now, does not lie in material force, nor does it lie in preaching to anyone, nor does it lie in telling the other fellow that they ought to be just or fearless, nor does it lie in anything in the way of conversation, preachments, or human plans, because there aren't any. We are far beyond the possibility of settling the world's problems by any human mode or means ever devised up to this moment. No one has brought forth a plan, and there isn't any possibility of anyone hitting upon a plan. It would take many, many weeks to go into all of the world's troubles to tell you the why and the wherefore of that, but the summary of it is this: any plan that would solve the world's problems for the Orient would not solve it for the Occident. Any plan that would solve it for the Occident will not solve it for the Orient. Any plan that solves it for the Occident and the Orient will leave the Middle East in between. There are too many factors involved to bring about a human plan for the solution of the world's problems. If that is so, and I'm willing to put it on an if basis, if that is so, then the solution to the world's problem does not lie in overcoming Russia or overcoming communism, because you will remember that we overcame Germany and saved democracy and Christianity. And then you'll remember that we overcame Germany and Japan and saved all those things. Now we're busy overcoming Russia to save all those things. It's another impossibility. I guess we began back in 1898 overcoming Spain. Overcoming nations or overcoming ideologies has never proven to be the solution of the world. Not the solution of even minor things. As a matter of fact, We had a horrible war here in the middle 1800s to solve the question, the color question. And the North won the war, and the South won the Negroes. There was no solution through that war to the problem. And there never will be in the South except through education and evolution. Wars won't do it. The higher degrees of humanity, the higher degrees of life and love that touch the population of the South will enable them, and has already touched them, to that place where there is greater freedom through greater education, greater opportunities. And so through evolution, the last 60 years has brought some measure of freedom and harmony, peace and prosperity to the Negro, but it still has not been completed, and another war won't complete it, not even a political war. Time will, evolution will, but only in one way, through the enlightenment of the citizenry. Overcoming the South militarily will not do it. Overcoming Russia, overcoming India, overcoming all of these nations and ideologies will not bring the solution. The reason is this: the basis of all discord remains, and that is fear. And that is fear. Ever since the days that William Randolph Hearst preached the Yellow Peril, there has been fear. Ever since the world has opened itself to communism, there has been fear. Fear is the underlying thing, and nothing is going to remove fear but one thing: as power is removed from the external and realized as an activity of one's inner being, fear disappears, and in no other way. In the old days, when only materia medica was available to heal disease, you had to fear fevers, you had to fear cancers, you had to fear colds and consumption, you had to fear everything, because they were the powers, and some of those in materia medica are still powers to be feared. But everyone who has had experience in spiritual healing goes right in and sits alongside of those conditions without fear and witnesses their overcoming. The overcoming of sin and disease through removing power from the external and placing it on that infinite invisible has been proven. If that were not so, the courts would have stepped in long ago, and stopped metaphysical and spiritual healing. It is only because the spiritually enlightened metaphysician has been able to hold up the banner of healing without infection and contagion spreading, without having more deaths among spiritually enlightened metaphysicians than among the rest of the population. Because of this, spiritual healing is respected by a great part even of the medical profession. Spiritual healing is becoming the concern of the churches. Churches all over this country and churches all over Canada and churches all over England are becoming interested more and more in the subject of spiritual healing, because a respect for spiritual healing has been enforced by the healing works that take place. They bear witness to themselves, and spiritual healing is accomplished how? In only one way: by removing from the sins and diseases of the world their power by being willing to face them, look at them, touch them if necessary, as the Master touched the leper. And say, thou hast no power, thou art a nothingness, appearing to be something, claiming to be something, but nothing, nothing, because power is God. God is power. There is no other power. There are not two powers. There are not good powers and evil powers. There are not powers of health and powers of sickness. There's only one power. And when you sit face to face with it, you don't have to shout at it either. You sit peacefully and quietly and with a smile on your face, as much as to say, you there, pretending to be a power, feared by the world, feared by men. They're looking around for the mightiest weapons to destroy you, and I'm sitting here smiling at you, and by the time I leave, there'll be no pain left in you, because there's no you. There's no you. There's an effect of some kind, but there's no power in it. The power is in I. The power is within me. The government of this world is in the divine consciousness. God's grace is our sufficiency. We don't need the weapons of the world. We need spiritual armor, not material armor. We need the sword of the Spirit, not the surgeon's knife. We need the realization that my peace is sufficient under this storm. You know, if I hadn't witnessed this for 27 years on a tremendous scale all over this country and Europe, I couldn't sit here so confidently and tell you that disease in and of itself isn't to be feared. It isn't it that has the power. What is controlling us is our fear of it. Our fear of the disease. It isn't your fear or mine. It's a universal fear that we are subject to. You never had a fear, and I never had a fear, and no person ever had a fear. But fear is a universal thing. It's all based on the belief that we have a separate life and that it can be destroyed. But actually, this universal fear, which you pick up and I pick up through our antennas of the mind, that's what's disturbing us, not the disease. Oh no, there never was a disease that had any power even to cause a pain. Our fear of the disease and what it will do to us is where the trouble lies. You could find in the world affairs a similar condition. Some of you know I have had the opportunity to work in 4 different organizations involving capital labor relations. In all of those, I was called in when the trouble was at its height, and in every single case from that day to this, there has never been strife in those organizations, nor a strike, nor a settlement that was other than peaceful and harmonious. And in at least one case, the head of the union and the head of the personnel are good friends, good enough to have lunches together. Now, there have been no human weapons or threats brought into any of those 4 organizations. There has only been brought into it a spirit of love, and I don't mean human love. A spirit of trust, but I don't mean trust in each other. Into those meetings has come a conviction on my part and on the part of those with whom I worked, that there is no power in hatred or greed or mad ambition, that the power is in God. That there is no use of looking to man whose breath is in his nostrils for justice or equity or mercy, because he hasn't got any. But with the realization of God in the midst of us, this presence and this power makes of none effect the human greed or lust of the corporation, if that's where it is, or the greed or lust or mad ambition of the union, if that's where it is. Because, you see, this is not a work of attributing virtues to capital and vices to labor, or attributing virtues to labor and vices to capital. Oh, no, no, this is not taking sides. No, this is entering in the spirit of recognition that lust, ambition, hate, jealousies, envying, strife are not personal qualities, nor do they belong to the educated or the illiterate, nor do they belong to the wealthy or the poor. These are qualities that can grab hold of any man in any circumstance, or woman. But with this understanding that they are not power, the powerlessness of them has been proved the same as it has been proved in the sick room. Now, in all my years in this work, I have never known of a practitioner to go into a sick room with a mask on the face or rubber gloves on the hand or lotions of antiseptics. Neither have I ever seen a practitioner take on the disease of the patient through infection or contagion. Once in a while, a practitioner not well taught has tried to heal a case through mental power and has come away more sick than the patient. That's true. There is such a thing as mental transference, and in the mental realm one needs to learn how to handle those things, but not in the spiritual realm. In the spiritual realm, where there is no physical force or mental force, I have never witnessed a practitioner suffering through infection or contagion or any of the ills of their patients, and I have witnessed that in a very, very large percentage of cases, the patients are healed, are lifted up, are raised up through spiritual means. But let us, in this message of the infinite way, not stop at using terms like spiritual healing works or spiritual healing is effective. Let us understand what we mean. What do you mean when you say I'm turning to spiritual healing? What do you mean when you say that spiritual healing is effective? What do you mean when you say that you can heal through spiritual means? And I'll tell you what the answer is. When you have come to the realization that there is only one power in all this universe, and that power is within you, and that power is good, then you can look at any condition on the face of the globe and smile at it. And if you have a receptive thought, you will have a quick healing. If it isn't too receptive, it'll be a slow healing. If it's too adamant in its materiality, you may not have a healing. That is one of the reasons that healings do not always take place. No one, so far as I know, has achieved 100% in the healing works. And the Master gave us the reason for it. There is the soil that is fertile, and you get your good fruitage there. There is the soil that is barren, and you get some demonstrations for a while, but it peters out. And then there is the rocky soil, and you get absolutely nothing from it. That is not said with condemnation or criticism or judgment, because no one of us can help at any moment what our state of consciousness is. The only thing we can help is if it remains that way. Because what we are at a given moment is the result of what we have been. But from the moment that we are brought into a spiritual study, we have the opportunity to turn the rocky soil into barren and the barren into fertile by abiding in the Word, letting the Word abide in us, abiding in meditation, a willingness to spend hours, days, weeks, and months in study, in prayer, in good works, in putting into practice the things we read. Now, of course, I admit this, that too many metaphysicians just read and expect that the reading is going to make their demonstration. And once in a while, lightning does strike, and it happens that way. But it just encourages too many other people to read and do nothing, because reading is the least practice, putting into practice individual lessons. I know that as I have witnessed in the healing of sickness and what the world calls sin, witnessed success in the healing work through the realization of one power and not fearing or hating the power of sin or disease, so the opportunity was given to me to work in these capital labor cases and prove that the same realization of one power was able to bring harmony into those relationships. And having traveled quite a bit around the globe from 1909 until 1956, I've also witnessed the change in human relationships when we bring to the world we travel in our sense of spiritual love. I mean by that an absence of hate or fear of our neighbor or our neighboring countries or our far countries, by bringing into them the realization that whatever the nature of their fears and whatever the nature of their hates, there's no power in them. Not denying that there are hates, not denying we're not absolute like that. We don't deny there are hates in the world, we don't deny there are fears, we don't deny any of these things. We just deny that they have any power to be anything, cause anything, do anything after the realization of one power is achieved. There are hates all over this world. I've spent probably too much time tonight enumerating them. But that's too because I believe in facing the facts that we're dealing with and not hiding our heads in the ground and saying there is no evil. There is no power in evil. Definitely there is no power in it, except such power as the world gives it and we accept. Now, it isn't you, it isn't I who give power to error. The world of materia medica, the world of theology, that is where the power of error comes from. Theology itself claims that there is a power of the devil, a power of evil, and so far God hasn't been able to overcome it. Philosophy claims there are two powers, good and evil, but it hasn't found a way yet to make good supreme, although it says that eventually it must be proved that good is supreme. But the formula hasn't been found yet. Sometimes in metaphysics we make the same mistake and believe that there are two powers, the mortal and the immortal, and if we just get the right practitioner or the right book or the right teaching, we'll prove that the immortal is stronger than the mortal. None of those things are true. None of them are true. That's why you never do find that book, because there isn't a book in the world that can reveal a way to overcome evil. The only way evil can be overcome is in the realization of its nature. That's the only way. Once you know that a universal fear is handling this world, even beginning with your personal world, begin to know that a universal fear, not your fear. Don't try to cure your own fear. Don't try to cure the fear of your patients. Please don't do that. As a matter of it, if they want to fear, encourage them to fear a little more. The more they get in the habit of fearing, the more they will see that their fearing didn't do anything. So don't worry about your patient's fear. Don't worry about your student's fear, and don't try to relieve them of it. But remember this: fear is a universal activity, or it's an activity of universal belief. and nail it right there. Understand right there that fear is a universal thing, and then realize there cannot be two powers. There can't be power in God and power in fear. And so let fear go on and do its worst. Don't try to remove it. Don't try to rise above it. Don't try to overcome it. Why should you? If it isn't anything in and of itself. If its only power is the power that you are giving it by accepting the world belief about it. Now, there isn't any condition that you can meet in your experience or the experience of your patients or family or friends, students. Later on, you will find there isn't any situation that you can meet in life that will not respond to the understanding that underneath that whole condition is fear. Fear. We all fear to be annihilated. We only fear disease because it will lead to death. If we weren't sure that disease leads to death, why would we care about a disease? If it didn't have power, that would be the end of it. We fear because we fear the extinction of our life. We fear lack because we may freeze or starve. Fear grips the world as a universal claim, and it makes men and women go to court and sue each other and lie in order to win the suit. And it just goes step by step until it sends men out in the battlefield to murder each other. And lately it has advanced even beyond that. It sends us out to murder neighboring populations wholesale. Now, fear does that. Nothing but fear. And mark this well, fear isn't a power. Fear isn't a power. The moment you realize that, you have taken the sting out of fear and made it ineffective, inoperative, and you've set an individual free in their spiritual identity. We need to lose fear of external powers. Whether those external powers are in germs or in bombs, whether those external powers are in strikes or in shutdowns, whether those external powers are in arms or ammunition, we need to withdraw the power from the fear. When we have done that, we have released each other. If I say to you, you are gripped with fear and you better overcome it, I have thrown you deeper down into fear. If I say to you, you are gripped with fear, and that's foolishness because fear has no power. Fear isn't a thing. Fear isn't a condition. The first, and if, of course, that is part of my consciousness, then that fear is lifted from you and removed from you. No other way. Now, whether or not it's a fear of disease, fear of infection, a fear of old age, fear of a calendar, fear of lack, fear of wars, fear of a depression, fear of a change of administration, all of those things, you yourself, as students, have to come to the realization, certainly, I fear a change. I fear a change in my finances. I fear a change in my health. I fear a change in my life. I fear the extinction of my sense of life. I fear the death of my body. And fear isn't power. I wish you could see the vision that surrounds a group when fear has been handled and removed. Not by declaring that God is all or God is love, but by an inner realization that God or love is the only power, and that fear, whether individual or collective, is not power. You'd have a great joy if you could witness just one person in your home who you know to be in fear of one sort or another. And never tell them to stop fearing. Never tell them there's nothing to fear. because they wouldn't be fearing if they could accept that. But silently within yourself, smile and realize the nature of fear as nothing, the nature of fear as powerlessness, the nature of that which is causing people to fear, that is extinction, whereas in reality they are immortal. Yes, minorities fear majorities. Majorities fear minorities. And yet actually, there is no basis for that fear, because minorities and majorities can live together and cooperate and share. But there's no use telling that to anyone who is fearful of numbers, fearful of being outnumbered, whose confidence is in numbers instead of in qualities. That too is universal, not individual. It always has been so, that a minority feared to be ruled by a majority, and the majority didn't feel comfortable alongside of its minority. That is why minorities have been enslaved, because majorities were afraid of their ever getting free. Let us understand this, that from the beginning of time this world has been ruled by fear. Nothing but fear has governed the emotions of men, and as long as fear is acknowledged to be a power, that will go on. First, start in small ways, either in your home or among those who come to you for help. Don't teach this, but practice it. Silently within yourself, realize that when a person needs help, they need help because they're fearing. If they weren't fearing, they wouldn't ask for help. It may not be a conscious fear, it may be an unconscious fear, but it's a fear. And begin right there and then to understand that fear isn't personal, it's a universal claim. But fear in and of itself isn't a power, and you and I withdraw power from fear, and one with God proves to be a majority. One with God, one with this truth, proves to be a majority. Then, as you prove this in one case after another, you will eventually find yourself a member of a group, either in a group or leading a group. And there you will have even a greater opportunity, because there you will know that most of the people have come together because of fear. Most groups, even in metaphysics, haven't come together to learn about God. The later ones do. Oh yes, after they have studied a teaching such as this, they come to the realization that we have nothing else to offer but a conscious union with God, and eventually we have classes in which our students who have long since overcome their personal fears and are meeting together but for only one purpose, uniting in God. Now, up to that point, you will find that most people who come to metaphysical work come because of a fear. They fear disease, or they fear lack, or they fear a change, or they fear lonesomeness. And you probably won't help it by telling them so, but you will help them by knowing that the fear that is driving them to God isn't a power. The very fear that is driving them to truth isn't a power. The fear itself is nothing but a universal claim, and nullify it there. And realize right there and then that not an individual fear or a collective fear is a power, since I am power. The power is within my consciousness and yours. The kingdom of God is within you. And as you withdraw fear, the power of fear, all power disappears from fear. And you've set your patient free. Rarely do they know what has happened to them, although most of the time they can tell you that they feel happy or at peace. but they do not realize that what has been taken from them is their fear. Actually, what has been taken from them is the power that fear had over them. Now, health doesn't remove fear, because the fear of becoming sick or old or dying or having an accident still remains. Becoming prosperous will not remove fear, because there still remains the fear of losing one's prosperity. Gaining high honors does not remove fear. There's the fear of losing them. So remember this, that a demonstration in and of itself is not the healing. Unless the healing is brought about through the destruction of the power of fear, you always have the possibility that your patient will go and sin again and bring 7 times more devils unto themselves. That is why it was said, "Go and sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you." In other words, through the consciousness of a practitioner, a patient may be healed. But it still is necessary to say to the patient, be careful, don't go back to the same state of thought that brought you into this condition, because a worse one can come upon you. It isn't enough, the healing isn't enough, if you have left that person with the possibility of indulging fear again. And there again you come to one of the mysteries of this work. I suppose everyone in this work at some time or other has longed for the power to be able to heal right and left. Just walk up and down the street saying, "Come on, pick up your bed and walk," or going into a hospital and saying, "Come on, let me all empty out of here." And I suppose you sometimes believe that you'd be doing a good thing if you did that. Don't ever believe that for a moment. If that was a good thing, God would give you the gift. There's nothing good about it, because next week they'll all be back again looking for the same doctor and a different pill, because the same thing that brought them there will bring them back again. That is why it is necessary, when you are engaged in healing work, not merely to heal the sick, but to be sure that your student is studying so as to learn the how and why and remain well. There are people going up and down the land, healing people right and left, evangelists, and according to their own figures, they heal about 20% of the people who come to them. But what happens to that 20% next week when the evangelist has left town and they get a cold or a grip or a flu? Well, the evangelist isn't there, so they have to send for a doctor. They're back just where they were before. Just where they were before. They've had a temporary, shall we call it, period between sicknesses. That's all they've had. And I want you to know that that is all that many students have, is intervals between sicknesses. You've seen it, haven't you? Hello, hello, yes, I need help. I'll give it to you right away. Hello, oh, that was wonderful. You know, I had an instantaneous healing. I'm going to send you a check tonight. Goodbye. 2 weeks later, hello, you know, I feel terrible. Would you give me another lift? Those are just intervals between sicknesses. That's not health. That's not harmony. Practitioners get weary of that after a while. I mean, if the practitioner is dedicated to God, to Christ, to a spiritual way of living, they get very weary of those people who merely call up day in, day out, or week in and week out, and another one, and another one, and another one. Sometimes they're very grateful and pay very liberally, but that doesn't change the fact that they get very, very tiresome, those people and those healings, because you do not see any spiritual progress, any interest in the spiritual way of life. And you get awfully weary just being a medical doctor for somebody. I don't know how doctors feel about curing everybody's ills and having them come back next week. Probably they're accustomed to it. But we don't get accustomed to it in this work. Our interest lies in healing as an evidence of what spiritual living can bring. Our work is not in the field of merely healing to make sick people well so that they can go out and have more dissipation to get sick again. No, that is the reason for our classwork. That is the reason there are books to study. That is the reason there are recordings. Not merely to sell things, but to provide opportunities for spiritual enlightenment. Whatever little light has come to me, and I can assure you that it's mighty little when you stop to think of what lies ahead in this world, but whatever has come to me has come from the years of devotion to the books, years of the devotion to works, years of devotion to prayer and meditation, not merely calling up someone for help and then waiting until the next illness to do the same over again. We are entitled to the help of each other all along the way. And if we have illnesses ahead of us for 20 years, we still have the right to help from each other, but at least be making the effort towards spiritual enlightenment. Don't sit back and merely look upon a spiritual healing teaching as just another medical practice, just another way to get well when you're sick, because it isn't. Our healing works are the signs following. The signs following what? Spiritual consciousness. The development, the cultivation of spiritual consciousness. The goal of our work is conscious union with God. The goal of our work is the ability to live and move and have our being in God consciousness. The healings are the signs following. These things shall be added unto you, if so be you seek the kingdom of God and his righteousness first. No signs will be given beforehand. That is why it is that the young student can't heal themselves. They haven't developed the spiritual consciousness. And so they go to the one who is dedicating their lives to God, to spiritual unfoldment, to the Christ. And because of that enlightened consciousness, the young student benefits. But that young student in their turn must go and do likewise, because the sign of healing which they've received is not a sign to them, it's a sign to their practitioner. Now, let me make this clear. We are not dealing with fear of anything or of anybody. That's not our concern. Our concern is just with the word fear itself. It isn't fear of anything or for anything. It's a universal fear itself, which in the last analysis is really a fear of self-extinction. That's the basic fear. But all we have to be concerned with is that beginning with this moment, we will accept the fact that fear in and of itself is not a power. That fear underlies our ills, our troubles, but only because we have accepted fear as a power, or we have developed a fear of something or someone to which we have attributed power. Now realize this: withdraw the power from the fear or the condition or the person, and you have met the situation. Not only that particular situation, you have spiritualized your consciousness to the extent that never again will you quite, or will you fear quite so deeply. Never again will you fear a sin or a disease or a lack or a limitation quite so deeply. And gradually you will find fear playing less and less part in your life, which means that it is replaced with understanding, and then grace takes over. Now I would like you to know this. There is a power of grace. By grace I mean our good achieved through the gift of God, achieved as the gift of God. Our good flowing to us and through us without our earning it or deserving it or laboring for it. That's what I mean by grace. I mean that our lives must be lived by grace. That is, that whatever we do, that there is a divine power working in us and through us to its successful conclusion, that the government is upon its shoulder. We do the work. We go out to our jobs. We do whatever is given us to do in a human way, but the power of grace worketh through us to its successful conclusion. The power of grace then feeds us and sustains us. Even though we continue to work, we no longer work for a living. We work because it is an activity of our being, normal, natural, and right. Now, just as there isn't a musician who wants to stop being a musician just because they don't have to earn their living at it, an artist doesn't stop being an artist just because they're independent of having to earn a living at it. So, in the end, we will do the work given us to do, regardless of the fact that we no longer have to earn our living at it. No longer do we have to do it because of earning a living. We do it now because it is a part of our being. The living comes by grace. Now that grace cannot work in us and through us while fear blocks it. The fear of I, the fear of myself, the fear of my possessions blocks the power of grace. It is when we throw ourselves open in the realization that there is a power of grace functioning in this world that we begin to lose our fears and hatreds of each other as individuals or as nations. Now there is a power of grace. That is the last thing that most people can come to believe. That there is a power of grace in this universe that would prevent our ever again having a worry or a fear. I don't mean having a natural concern for the things of life. I mean a worry or a fear. There is a natural power of grace. God's grace is our sufficiency in all things. It feeds us and clothes us, heals us, maintains us, and sustains us. But there is a function that we have to perform, and that is to become free of fear, and we cannot become free of fear except in proportion as we can realize there is no power in the external universe. All power is within ourselves, acting upon this universe. All power is within ourselves. Nothing from without can enter to defile or lie. Nothing from without, because there is no power in anything without. The realization of that sets us free and enables the power of grace to operate. There is a power of grace that will heal us. There is a power of grace that will supply us. There is a power of grace that we can carry into our capital and labor relations and our national and international relations when the power of fear has been recognized as having no power, being no power, governing nowhere, no time. Well, is that true? Let us overcome fear by understanding that that which is external is not power. whether it's a person, a place, a thing, or a condition. And be assured of this, just as the Kaiser at one time was the decoy that made us fear and get into war, and the next time it was Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin or whatnot, so it is that today cancer, consumption, heart disease, Russia, atomic bombs, these are the decoys that will keep us going into one era after another until it is understood that we must not fear them, nor must we fear the power, the fear that they engender, but realize the presence of the gentle Christ is sufficient to calm the storms of life.